This is a video about reparations and what Hebrew Israelites claim white people owe them because of what has happened in the past, and how Hebrew Israelites actually do not follow God's law as they claim to. In Deuteronomy chapter 19, we see a precedent established by God in which 2 or 3 witnesses must be presenting evidence, their testimony or their evidence, in order to convict somebody. There must be 2 to 3 witnesses in order for someone to be convicted in court of a crime. If there are not at least 2 witnesses, then you cannot convict someone of a crime, and you don't have weight behind your argument that they've done anything wrong, because if you don't have the witnesses, they are innocent in the court and they can't be punished. So, with that in mind, we have to look at what the Hebrew Israelites ask white people to do. They like to bring up how white people have treated black people terribly in this country in the past, and how white people have stolen Native American lands in the past. And that's true. European people did invade the Americas. They invaded North America, South America, and they took over Native American lands, and the Native Americans seem to have come over, from what we know of, from researchers, is that Native Americans used to be Asians, and Asian people came over the Bering Strait, a land bridge over up near Alaska, and they also seem to have come over the ocean to Chile, and they propagated, these Asian people propagated in the North American continent and South American continent. So these people owned what we call the Americas today. They had land, they possessed land there, and European people came in and took it. And it is true that European people did steal land. And Hebrew Israelites foolishly think that Native American people are actually Israelites, and they don't seem to have a comprehension of the research that's been done on the first people who lived in the Americas. These people are Asian people, and Hebrew Israelites believe that Asians are Moabites. So if the Hebrew Israelites were historically consistent, they would actually claim that everybody who propagated in the Americas coming over from Asia, they would have to say, oh, these are all Moabites, not Israelites. But the people are not Moabites, and they're not Israelites, they're Asian people. That being said, land was stolen, and so and black people had things stolen from them by white people in the atrocities committed in the transatlantic slave trade, and black people themselves were stolen, which requires the death penalty for kidnapping in biblical law. And so all these terrible things happened, and now Hebrew Israelites are saying, hey, white people, hey, Edomites, they think that white people are Edomites, you need to give us reparations, you need to give us money, or you need to give us land, you need to restore what's been taken. And the thing is, that's not how it works with nations. When you're dealing with court cases and people stealing things and committing theft, you need the 2 to 3 witnesses, the 2 or 3 witnesses, to convict an individual. And what we're dealing with, and what happens in these circumstances in which property is stolen, we have a bunch of individuals who are taking part in this, and each of those people would need to be established as a participant in the theft, all these people who stole way back when, they would have to be convicted in court with two or three witnesses of actually committing theft in order for there to be a true charge established against these people. And that has not happened. And there is the fact that if you know that you have inherited stolen property and you know who it was stolen from, or you know their descendants, the people who would have inherited the property that you now have, if you know who would have inherited it, then you should make restitution and give whatever you inherited that was stolen, you should give it to the descendants of the person who was stolen from. That's the proper way of doing things. But right now, there's no way, unless we have exact writings from history about each given circumstance, which could exist in some instances, but if we don't have historical documentation, then we can't establish exactly who are the descendants of the people who stole and who are the descendants of the people who were stolen from. We can in a general sense, but we can't do that with regards to which specific piece of property or which specific item that was stolen. So if we're looking at a certain piece of land and we think, okay, the people who own that, it has to be the first people who landed in America, or whoever came across that land first, they owned it first, these Asian people. If we look at that piece of land, we have to be able to establish that that specific piece of land was stolen by this specific person, and this specific person stole it from this other specific person. And if we can trace their descendants, if we can have witnesses to these things and testimony of these things, and we can trace their descendants, then we could have a case for reparations. But for millions of people, you can't do this. And for a massive amount of the land in America, you couldn't possibly do this. We just don't have documentation that far back. And so you can't just willy-nilly go around saying, hey, white person, give me money because you're the same ethnicity as people who stole from my ancestors who's a different ethnicity. And you need documentation, you need witnesses, you need the witnesses to convict in biblical law. So this is biblical law, this is what God says. And at the same time, these Hebrew Israelites who claim to follow God's law are not following God's law by requiring or seeking to require white people to give them reparations when there's not the documentation and witnesses needed to actually establish that a certain item or piece of land was stolen by a certain person and is now in possession of their descendants, and who now need to give this land or this item to these other specific people who we know to be the descendants of the person who was stolen from. So we need the witnesses. And so Hebrew Israelites, if you're watching this, please stop making stupid arguments about reparations and actually follow God's law and believe that Jesus is Yahweh, because right now you have a false god. Today is the day of salvation. Today is the day to follow God's law and make sure that you have the two witnesses to convict somebody before you bring a charge against them. Make sure in court, make sure that if you're going to try to get reparations for theft or atrocities that have occurred in the past, make sure you have the witnesses. Make sure the matter can be established in court. If you don't do that, you're not following biblical law.